It says, I overcomplicated famous brands. Yeah, like disguise videos.
In my last video, I simplified famous package designs, and while some people liked it, a lot of others got quite upset. So to appease the masses, I'll be making minimal products more complex to bring back some of their personality. And first up, we have Pringles. Now, I think I speak for everyone when I say a little bit of us died when Pringles went from this cute little guy to an egg with a mustache. But I'm gonna fix this grave injustice and mold Mr. Pringle into a new form even better than his original. And you'll notice I'm redesigning the grab-and-go version because I really just didn't want to have to make this video in portrait mode. Okay, so let's just start off with the logo. I'm just gonna come in here and separate the text from the head because I want to give our boy something he's never had before, a body. Now, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I looked at the original logo, I always imagined him as a little showman, you know, kind of like the ringleader in a circus. So let me just get some reference here. Now, if this isn't clearly a trained professional, I don't know what is. So let me just drop this in here, get rid of all these posers, then just rearrange his body here. So basically, I'm just gonna do an illustration for all of this. I just wanna set up a base for reference first. Now, I'm not sure a whip is an appropriate item for him, so maybe a cane would work a bit better. Now, basically, everybody on the internet agrees that Mr. Pringle and the Monopoly guy are twins. And since we all know twins like sharing, I'm just gonna borrow his arm and top hat here to place right there. Let me get it so he doesn't have two right arms. But I guess this bow tie logo should be a tad bigger, so it can kind of act as a natural cutoff to his body. And maybe I can scooch everything down just a bit to get it all more centered. And now I can get to illustrating. So basically how this went down was I kept the same head shape and eyes, but added a little more detail to the stash. I brought back his iconic hair, which, be honest, you spent your entire life thinking these were eyebrows instead of a rat hairdo, didn't you? Well, then I made the suit similar to the reference, spent forever trying to get these hands right, and finished him off with his iconic bow tie. Let's just stick with the original white head and brown hair, and the rest basically just matches the reference colors. Now I want to render him in a similar style, you know, like other mascots, think like Tony the Tiger or Chester Cheetah, and there is a few simple steps to do that. First, we just need to lay down a little shading to show that our light source is coming from the upper right corner. And just a little tip for you, most of these characters tend to use blue shadows on the areas that are white, because it generally looks a lot more appealing than gray. Now, one thing you'll notice, for example, is that Tony here has a nice soft shading, not hard edges. So I can just come in here and take a soft brush and soften everything up a bit. Bigger regions like this are gonna be really soft, and tinier regions will be somewhat sharper. And another thing, basically all of these mascots have is some epic rim lighting, and they've got that basically everywhere. And another little color tip for you is to use blue as your rim light on black surfaces, because that tends to almost always look better than a white rim light. Now, just a little highlight along the hair, some soft shine on the vest to make it look like slick fabric, but a hard shine on the cane just because that's a much smoother surface. And finally, a shine on the hat, and then I'll use a little bit of line hatching to make that hat look like fabric. Now, after tweaking the lighting just a tad, I'm gonna give our man just a subtle stroke around him and a little drop shadow to help him pop off the background. Now, I don't really love the bow tie text just because everything here looks so red. So let me grab just the text part, and I think I can size that up to cover roughly the same surface area as the original badge. Maybe even give that a stroke so that all these letters feel more like a solid unit. And now I'm going to take a cue from the original Pringles logo and make this text yellow with some subtle bevels on that. Then a black stroke around everything to help it match the illustration. And I want to go for kind of a 3D look, so I'm just going to extrude out these edges. Then a little shading and some extra shine to really make this all look gold. Then let's get that original text on here and the product type, potato chips. And speaking of chips, we need to actually show some on here. So what I'm thinking is these empty spots all around the can would be the perfect place to put them, kind of like they're just raining down all around it. Let's give those some lighting and a touch of drop shadow to finish it off. And lastly, I want to add a little bit of movement to this scene with this cool little spiral pinwheel in the background. Well, it looks like we've gone from our simple little egghead to a top-tier showman ready to die.
Nah, that's hard. Dang, I mean, I don't eat Pringles, you know, I don't eat like junk food like that. But that left side, that is trash. Whoever did that, I mean, I know it probably saved them money not to have to do all that, like print all that out, you know, the ink, whatever goes into having to print that stuff out on cans all the time. But dang, that sure would catch my eye in the store, I'm not gonna lie. That the one on the right, the one he made,
dazzle the chip world.
fine.
Up next is Monster Energy.
I don't
Now, I actually
drink
love this
Monster,
design already.
never drunk
It's simple, but it looks
Monster ever in
great.
my life.
But if
Don't
we
plan
did
on
want to
to.
complicate things a bit, well, we've got these big claw marks right here. So the obvious choice seems to be to add in the monster that's making those claw marks. Now, if we just take a lesson from every horror movie ever, you never want to show too much of the monster. So I think I'll move the name up top and the claw marks down a bit. That way I can put some claws down in this area. Kind of like they're actually in the process of making those slash marks. And the rest of the monster will be hidden. And of course, we'll need some actual fingers on here as well. Okay, so this looks pretty bad, but with some textures and lighting, I think I can get it to look decent. And you guys know how in literally every horror film, there's always that one character that leaves the group and goes straight to the place that guarantees their certain death, all the while thinking they're completely safe. Well, my friends, that is you without the private internet access VPN. You're out here surfing and hash that because it pretends your IP literally is the phone you have. Well, Netflix blocks Spirit is evasion. This works with unlimited subscription. 24/7 work on the can look like this. I'd like to work on the scratches first. And I'm kind of wondering how it would be if I made this can look like rock. Then just come in here and select the logo, expand it a bit, and then we can fill that in with the same texture. And then that'll create this really cool 3D effect, you know, kind of like there's a rock shell around the can and the monster's ripping through it to get to that drink inside, or something like that. And now I think I want to add some texture to these
transition
marks. Let me just fix that up so it's
gonna
nice and green. And then I just want to come in here and make a nice gradient so that it starts out darker here at the top and gets brighter as we move towards the claws. I guess kind of like the core of the drink is emitting light. Now let's come in here and get some green light on these edges like it's being cast out from the inside of the can. We'll just go in here and add in some sharper corners just so all of this isn't so smooth. And I've actually decided to expand those edges and just make them a little thicker. And then come in with a rim light to really help build that contrast between the background. Now getting back to the claws.
I really think the reason why they don't do it like that, like go all crazy,
texture for these nails. Then I've got some tree bark for a linear scratchy texture. And I'll finish it all off with a finely detailed grunge look.
have to do
And
that.
I'm thinking I want these nails to be like super rugged and cracked with a nice variety of bigger cracks and smaller ones. I'll give those cracks a grayer color to make it look like they've been aged. And I'll come in here with some highlights. And this just really adds a ton of dimension to the claws and gets us some of that extra fine detail that we need. Finally, a touch of soft shading across this whole thing. Now as for the skin, check this out. I found this really cool little alligator head, which I think if I put it right here, I can warp the eyelid to fit right around the base of the claw, and that forms a really nice transition flat between all of our scaly part and the actual nail. I think I want this to be slightly less saturated, like maybe more of a gray tone, and then some pretty heavy shading on here. But then maybe some highlights along these ridges to help counteract that. So I just finished up the other two fingers in exactly the same way as the first, and now I'm going to bring in some fog to have something for those fingers to reach out from, make that green, and just fade it out at the bottom so that bright green doesn't draw too much attention away from the logo. I really want some nice glow around the edge of this logo, especially here around the claws. And of course that light will be cast onto the claws themselves, which will really help just ground them into the scene. And lastly, just a few particles coming up from the bottom, because that just always looks really cool. So I'm a little conflicted because half of me thinks this turned out really cool, but the other half thinks these claws look like they came from Spyro 1. And now we've got your butter from another mother. Lando, these claws...
He did say oversimplified. Sure, that's crazy.
look like they came from Spyro 1. And now we've got your butter from another mother, Land O'Lakes. This brand has actually gone through several changes over the years. The original design had this full body shot of a Native American woman. The one after that was just her head. And in the end, they got rid of her entirely. So now the brand is just kind of lackluster. I mean, it's not bad. It's just
over here.
simple.
I don't know what
So
that
my mission
is.
is to bring back some life into all of this scenery. And I'll start by making this whole bottom part of the lake. Now I do like the way that these trees surround the water. I just want to extend that up through the foreground to show that the land wraps around the entire lake, which also helps us develop a little more depth in this scene. Now I'm thinking a nice big tree would look good right here on the left side. Maybe give that a bit of a branch hanging down. Yes, that is a branch. And once again, this is all just a base for an illustration I'm going to do for the entire thing. Now I probably don't want to stick a similar tree on the other side just because that's way too symmetrical. So maybe I can go with a log instead. Get us a little moss growing on top of that bad boy. Now we do need something on this upper right side to balance it with the left side. I found this really cool little rock formation that I can put right right over here. Maybe a little vegetation growing on top of that as well. Heck, maybe even a little bush right here between these. That's looking pretty good. But now, you know, I feel like this area over here is just too empty. So maybe a small rock somewhere down here. And heck, I'll even throw in a mushroom too.
Creative, man.
Papa Smurf a place to
I'll be happy with my thumbnails I'll be making.
So we get a nice round lake. And to give this whole scene a bit of grandness, how about some mountains? I can just slope those towards the horizon.
Still be making me happy that I
and
can
since
do
we all
that.
know the Earth is actually flat,
my
we'll
little
need to connect these so the water doesn't run off the edge of the
crazy.
Lastly, I want to add in some clouds in a circular fashion that just point right towards the logo. Do you guys see the vision yet? Probably not, but just wait. So for the art style of this current illustration, they've used kind of a pointillism style.
I see the vision. I know he's not done.
I've always been a
like
big fan of a show called Gravity Falls. I think the forest scenery in there is just incredible, so I want to do something similar with my illustration. After some quick sketching, I've got this. I'll just drop in some color, and I've got this beautiful little scene that uses a very similar color scheme as the original. Let me get the logo back in here, and I'll start painting the sun, which is going to be right behind the O in the logo. And now when it comes to painting the shadows, we know exactly where they should be because the direction of the light source is so pronounced. And notice I'm being pretty detailed on the shadows for the objects that are really close to us, but all the trees in the back won't have any, because that's one thing we can use to make them feel further back in the scene. Now I'll just darken up the edge of the sky to really bring some extra focus to that sun. Now how about a little light flare over top of those mountains, the trees back here, and then just some shading on all the objects up front. And I think lightening up these line colors will really help sell that light effect better. Darken up this water up front to match that lighting as well. And of course we need some nice reflections of these beautiful trees, along with those mountains, which I will blur and make pretty subtle. Let's get the butter text on here, and a smaller salted right underneath. And of course we can't forget about that net weight, which I'll give a black stroke just to help it stand out a bit. And I just want to beef up the logo with a little stroke and a white outline to really help it stand out from that illustration. I think a little texture over everything will really bring out that nature vibe that we're going for. And lastly, I just want to bump up some of these colors to make this scene come to life. I don't know about you guys, but I am stoked with how this turned out. It's got all the charm of the original just cranked up a notch. You can watch me oversimplify famous package designs here, and be sure to subscribe so the monster doesn't get you when you sleep.
Take a tour of a...
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it look cool. Can't lie to you. But seeing that in a store for butter, I don't know. It's cool though.